You know, I saw an interesting article in Zero Hedge this morning discussing IKEA's new tiny house that they're going to be selling. You know, it's a complete package. You just go up there, and you know, you have your trailer hitch, and you tow it away to wherever it is you're going to live in your little 187 square foot camper trailer, essentially. And a lot of what I've seen about the tiny house movement, as they like to call themselves, is kind of dismissive, uh, you know, because it's easy to just look at this stuff and say, hey, these people are talking about living in camper trailers and they think that they're reinventing the wheel, or in this case, the house. But even if you don't agree with these people and you want to live in 180 square feet or less, I guess, in the case of some folks, if you don't want to live in a trailer, what they are, they're offering a solution to a real problem. And that problem, of course, is unaffordable housing. Unaffordable housing is a topic that I cover quite frequently on this channel in the context of the current housing bubble that was created by our glorious Federal Reserve System. Something I haven't, directly discussed is that as a result of that bubble, housing sizes in the U.S. have been getting bigger and bigger, even as families in the U.S. have been getting smaller and smaller. The reason for this is that when you have, very cheap credit, near 0% interest rates, 2, 3, 4% mortgage rates, people are able to afford to buy a house with a much bigger price tag than they otherwise would be. And, if you have someone whose needs have been met, yet they have all this extra budget, what are they going to do with the money? Well, are they just going to, buy what they need and then not max out their credit? No, of course not. They're going to borrow as much money as they can and buy the most expensive house that they can. And so the way that that the market has adjusted for that over the past half century or more is by offering people bigger and bigger houses, even if those people don't necessarily need it. Sure, a couple with no kids living in a 3,000 square foot house, no problem. It's very common these days. And so not only, do the prices of existing homes get bid up during these asset bubbles because interest rates are so low and because people can afford to bid the prices of these houses up, but the new houses that get built are, just so much more expensive to begin with. It used to be that what today might be considered a tiny house, something under 1,000 square feet, was just considered a house. Because there was a time in American history in which, people paid the money to build their house up front. Or, God forbid, they even built it themselves. Which, by the way, is what these tiny house people do. So, what they're doing is nothing new. It's actually a much more traditional way of living, other than the part of putting it on a trailer, which I'm not very fond of, aesthetically speaking. Just walk around, an old city, or even, it doesn't have to be an ancient city, just something that, is before, the mid-20th century. New Orleans comes to mind because you walk around there and they have just a whole mess of these post-Civil War shotgun houses, which are like 500 square feet. They're only like 10 feet wide, and they were built for, the urban environment. And those were not considered tiny homes. Those were just homes. Those were homes that people could afford. And this was before the era of Fed asset bubbles. And so the Federal Reserve has not only affected how much it costs for us to live, they have not just driven up our cost of living over the last 100 years, well, 100 plus years at this point, 104 years. They have changed the way we live. They have completely remade the landscape of American life with respect to the home and, the economy in general. Really, the distortion in the way that people live, in this movement of living in these massive houses that have these overbearing mortgages that weigh around your neck like an albatross for your entire life. until you're dead, or until you're one of the few people who actually pays off a mortgage. This is not something that's normal throughout American history or human history. And so you can just imagine how distorted the rest of our economy must be. There are an infinite number of examples of things that exist today in the form that they do that would not exist were it not for the Fed's interventions. And something like the tiny house movement is a rebellion against that. I look at these so-called master planned communities that we have here in Florida, to where they're not really towns. I mean, they're literally corporations that market themselves to people and say, hey, you should come and buy brand because it will make you happy. But in this case, brand is, a town, quote unquote. And what the brand wants you to buy is an oversized, overbuilt, and highly manicured plastic way of life. They want to suck you in and get you to sign one of these mortgages that will then be sold off to Fannie and Freddie and packaged into one of those mortgage-backed sausages that helped cause the last financial crisis. It's just a way of, the system getting its teeth in you and luring you in. And everything about these tiny homes subverts our, Fed-generated corporate housing market. Instead of, building this massive concrete block behemoth on, some postage stamp lot that is assigned to you by your corporate overlords, the tiny house people have their own, unique dwelling that in most cases is designed and built by them, that they then, put wherever they want, anywhere in the country. Not within these cloistered, gated communities, but rather out, in the open space. And when your house doesn't make for such a comfortable cavern, you tend to spend more time outside. It's interesting to watch if you look at at least where I live in Florida, over time, how houses have just completely lost their outdoor space. They went from having large wraparound porches that cracker-style houses were known for, porches that went around the entirety of the house in an overhang that that was very distinctive, to then just having front porches, which are nice. Still love a nice front porch. To then having, maybe a little screened-in area in the back of your house that doesn't necessarily get a great breeze because it is, in the backyard and you have, 8-foot privacy fencing all the way around your property. Until finally today, a house that's built today in Florida, you get no outdoor space at all. It's just a little concrete slab where the back door is, so that you don't step right out into the mud. People have been conditioned for generations now to stay indoors, to become vitamin D deficient. And I think it's no coincidence that over that same period of time, the landscape surrounding our homes in Florida has become, and I think this is true in the rest of America as well, has become far more plastic, let's say, much more manicured and manufactured. And I'm not just talking about the proliferation of cheap lawn ornaments that we get from the creation of plastics. I mean the importation of all of these exotic plants, the proliferation of home and garden television, which essentially programs American consumers to have a particular taste when it comes to anything to do with housing. It's no coincidence that you walk in any house that has been recently updated, so to speak, that has had a new kitchen put in, and the like, that you notice that there are white shaker cabinets all throughout every kitchen. It's no coincidence that now the color gray is showing up in a bunch of homes. native plants have almost disappeared from any new neighborhood that is being built. You just see lots of tropical palm trees. You see bright, shiny flowers. You might see the occasional oak tree, but pine trees, sable palms, palmettos, all of these things are gone. Native grasses, everything is pretty much St. Augustine now, which was a type of grass that I believe was just invented by the University of Florida to look pretty. And of course it must be sustained only through heavy irrigation and fertilization, which is true of, frankly, all these non-native plants. They require a lot of artificial assistance in order to look pretty as people see it. And so the original appeal of the suburb, getting out of the city and getting back to, enjoy a little bit of nature, having clean air to breathe and being able to see the trees and things, even that idea has been in itself subverted by the system over the past few decades, to where, you go out in the suburbs now and it looks nothing like, the natural environment of that area. So I guess I'll close with a bit of a word of advice to the tiny house people. I feel like the attention that is drawn towards their so-called movement is done in a way in which it's not going to welcome the most amount of people. And by that I mean that the examples of tiny homes that are presented in the media are rather extreme. There's essentially people saying, well, you can live in this 3,500 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, or you can live in 150 square feet. That's your choice. We think 3,500 square feet is excessive, so we're going to live in 150. Whereas I think you'd reach a lot more people if you just try to convince them that, hey, you don't have to live in your bedroom, essentially, and make your bedroom, your kitchen, your bathroom, and your bedroom, and your office all in one, and your living room. But there's a lot of fluff that we can cut out of these massive houses. For example, as recently as the 1950s, they were building houses that were only 1,000 square feet. And before that, it was very common to find houses under 1,000 square feet. You don't have to jump all the way down to 150. Just jump down to 1,000. You're still, essentially living in 1/3 the size of the house. You have 1/3 the upkeep, 1/3 the cost to build it. I think that you could go even smaller. For most people, smaller than 1,000 would be fine. If you just have a couple. Because think about it. Back when people were living in these much smaller houses that I was talking about earlier, they had much bigger families. They had many, many kids. A lot of couples these days don't have any kids. A lot of folks are single for a long time in their life. They don't get married at 18 like they used to. But of course, as I've outlined, the reason why all of these problems exist to begin with is because of the Fed's interventions. And so is it really worth it to try and fight a losing battle against them? Because all these things that that I've been talking about, all these positive benefits that there are to the the whole tiny house thing, they would be reality without the Fed's interventions. And so that would seem to suggest that well, there's not much you can do about it, because it is what it is. If you're fighting a market distortion, you're going to lose money. These guys who short Tesla, for example, I think they make a great case. I think that the Tesla longs are, well, I don't want to use non-family friendly language, but it's a bunch of nonsense that they spew. And I think that the Tesla bears make a great case. Well, guess who makes money? It's the Tesla bulls. The guys who say, well, I buy Tesla because Elon's smart, and it's always going to go up. Well, guess what? Tesla keeps going up. Although, actually, now's a bad time to say that, because they are in a bear market now. But leaving that aside, Tesla has not crashed. Tesla is nowhere near priced where somebody like Mark Spiegel thinks that it should be priced. And so my point is, I can argue till I'm blue in the face that we should build smaller houses that are more affordable for people, and that perhaps would be attainable without these massive 30-year mortgages. And if you don't, and even if you get that 30-year mortgage, just think about how low your payment would be. You wouldn't have this huge weight over your neck. Maybe we could get to the point to where, your mortgage payment is, just another bill, not something that is, I guess, so insurmountable. But as long as the market is being manipulated to incentivize the opposite and to penalize, what I'm advocating for, as far as regulations go, because, who controls all of these zoning boards? It's of course the corporate housing developers. Governments all across America have made these tiny house folks persona non grata, run them out of their jurisdictions in favor of the big housing developers, so that they can maintain their monopoly on highly overpriced housing. And the only places where the tiny house stuff has been able to thrive has been places where housing is more affordable to begin with, because that's where your developers don't have an interest to lobby against them. Now, of course, a lot of the problems of the tiny house movement that they've had legally has been these folks who live in trailers, and I think that a lot of that could be alleviated if if they were building freestanding permanent units. However, then you get into all of the local building codes and things like that, and that just, that's something that really inflates the price of what you're doing. All these houses that I've talked about, from 100 years ago, 150 years ago, those were built before building codes. They're grandfathered in. They're not, they weren't subject to having all these county inspectors come out who you essentially, they just exist to be bribed to sign a piece of paper. They don't do anything. They don't keep our houses safe. All they do is act as a barrier to entry, a high fixed cost that is supposed to put a floor in the price of housing, a pretty high floor. And I don't think that there's anything else I can say at this point. I think that I've about summed this up, and so I would encourage all of you, if you're interested, just try and examine, depending on where you live now, and if that is, if housing is a big stress for you price wise, which I'd imagine it is. It is for most people. Think about how you could do more with less space. Don't go nuts like a lot of these people who sell everything they own and move into a VW bus essentially. You don't need to go that far. But anyway, there I go again. I'm ending it here. Bye.